Hello, my name's Bev and I'm the author of the book Please Eat, A Mother's Struggle to Free Her Teenage Son from Anorexia, which describes our family's battle with the deadly eating disorder, anorexia nervosa, which my teenage son Ben developed back in 2009 when he was just 15 years old. I've been looking back on my around the dinner table posts to see where we were 12 months ago. Truly, I feel the anger I felt in June 2010 when, just because Ben's BMI wasn't rock bottom, my concerns weren't taken seriously, despite the fact that rugby-playing Ben had lost 1/4 of his total body weight over the last 12 months. Initially, the treatment team from CAMHS did permit me to administer a 3 times meals, 3 times snacks eating plan, and he started to regain some lost weight. But when the eating disorder threw a tantrum 3 months on and refused to continue, the team decided to, quote, hand back the control to Ben, unquote, because they felt this would be, quote, more helpful to him, unquote. When, as a result, his weight started to go down, they weren't, quote, unduly concerned, unquote, because at this stage he was, quote, nowhere near what he was when treatment started, unquote, which was, quote, a good sign because he's done so well, unquote. The team decided it was, quote, time to focus less on the eating side of things and more on working together as a family to see what is helpful to Ben and what isn't, unquote. I was banned from mentioning food, eating and calories whilst on holiday. The holiday was a nightmare and Ben lost some weight. Over the next few months, Ben's weight continued to go down, and with this, his moods and behaviours deteriorated, including suicide threats, plus some increasingly dangerous and distressing behaviours. At the treatment sessions with CAMHS, he was in a good mood when he'd lost or maintained weight, and was held to live with if he gained weight. As a result, the weight continued to zigzag downwards. Meanwhile, Ben was still in complete control of his eating and food preparation, except the evening meals, which I did. The thinking was that by, quote, experimenting to see what does and doesn't work and making mistakes, unquote, he'd learn from them and this would help him change. Quote, it's all a bit of an experiment, unquote, they insisted. By September and October 2010, we were still experimenting and getting nowhere. But then in October 2010, we experienced a breakthrough. And what triggered this breakthrough? Well, for the first time ever, the treatment team came down on Ben like a ton of bricks following his second heart scare in 6 months, when his pulse went down to 29 and I rushed him into hospital again. He fought tooth and nail to be discharged, kicking furniture and having to be restrained by security staff and eventually the police. Suddenly, at our next treatment session with CAMHS, the atmosphere was different, with direct, straight talking of the we insist you have to do X or there's a real chance you could end up in hospital, with the heart scare, we don't want to have to wait until your BMI is dangerously low, we could hospitalise you now, kind of thing. The word sectioning was used. I believe that something clicked inside Ben. By this stage, he trusted the treatment team because they were working with him in the way he, the eating disorder, wanted them to. And here they were laying down the law, so they must be right. Also, the Prozac he'd been prescribed back in August started to have some positive effects on his mood. Maybe it was a combination of the two, but Ben's motivation, moods and behaviours did a U-turn for the better. However, he didn't gain any weight. 6 months on from this, he'd simply maintained and fell into a motivation-less sort of limbo land because he felt he wasn't achieving anything. Also, the positive action and drive I'd seen from the treatment team following the heart scare kind of seemed to melt away, and it seemed like we were back to experimenting. After a few months of genuinely feeling that the treatment team and me were on the same page, moving forward and achieving things, everything ground to a halt. This is when, at Easter 2011, I introduced the recovery contract, which worked a treat in every single respect, weight gain, motivation, etc., until a couple of unhelpful comments from CAMHS, see recent videos, stopped Ben in his tracks and appeared to undo the good that had been done. So I feel the anger I felt 12 months ago almost to the day, and this anger hasn't changed that much, really. And I'll just quickly read the next post, which is from the 23rd of June, and it's called More on 1 year ago today. And here's a note I sent to the psychiatrist. I've just found a copy of a note I sent to the psychiatrist 1 year ago, following Ben's meltdown. Last night, Ben had another serious breakdown, similar to the roof incident a couple of weeks ago. Yet again, he went into that manic state of mind where he has no emotions and starts to talk in a deeper, slower, almost drugged kind of way, saying there's no reason to go on, his life is a total waste of time, etc. Ben started the descent at tea time in response to being gently encouraged to eat more calories than he's been eating because his weight has been going down. Initially, I was alerted by his friend's mum, who called to say she was very concerned because Ben had sent her son an email saying, "Give me 3 good reasons why I should live." I immediately confronted Ben about it, and things spiralled downwards after that, seriously downwards. My husband is working away this week, so it was just me on my own, and none of my friends were available to come round. Ben refused to go to A&E, and the emergency doctor didn't sound as if he was going to be much use. It didn't warrant a 999 call though, thankfully. But it was very serious, and Ben said he's always thinking about suicide, only he doesn't have the courage to do it. Or, as I said last time, it will happen as a result of some action taken simply because he's lost all his emotions and doesn't give a damn about what happens. I worry that one day he will find the courage to do it, and as his mood deteriorates, as his weight goes down, I strongly believe something terrible will happen. He says he's permanently depressed, and the times when he seems okay, he's just pretending. It's all fake and not real, he says. The real Ben is this depressed, broken down mess. This is a risk we can't ignore, and as his mother, I certainly can't ignore it. Something needs to be done. Thank God he came out of that nightmarish phase. That's the end of that post. So, one thing about looking back on 2010, as I've just done there from 2011, is that it shows how far Ben had come in terms of recovery. But it also shows my worries that why certain things weren't being done in his treatment, because he was losing weight, his moods were getting worse, his behaviours were getting worse, and I could have lost him so easily, and I really felt at that time that no one cared, that no one believed that there was a major problem. And seriously, it took a second visit to the hospital with his low pulse rate, 29, which is very, very dangerously low, for anything to be done. And it was some time, years, to be honest, when I stopped being as angry as I had been. Well, I am still angry about it, reading about it now, and I can't understand why it was all about experimenting and what Ben wants, and letting Ben prepare his own meals apart from the evening meal, and not letting me talk about food and eating too much in case it stressed him out. And the fact that Ben lost weight during that time, right up until the end of 2010, is proof in my mind that he wasn't getting the right kind of treatment. Regardless of how lovely the CAMHS team were as people and how caring and kind they weren't giving him the right kind of treatment. And the more I found out about eating disorders on the Feast forum for parents of young people with eating disorders, and reading loads of evidence-based stuff, scientific papers and so on, the more I realised that really it was as if they were gambling with my son's life. And it wasn't just that, it was the case that the longer the eating disorder was prolonged, the longer Ben remained trapped and couldn't get on with his life. The treatment was painfully slow, and I was never told at any stage really what sort of treatment he was receiving, apart from the fact he was receiving treatment for an eating disorder. And one thing they never liked doing was calling it anorexia, because the term anorexia usually on paper only applies to a certain BMI level, and that's another problem with boys and eating disorders, that in Ben's case and in other cases, their BMI can be quite high before the eating disorder hits. I mean, remember, Ben was a rugby player. He was quite a big guy. I mean, muscular. He was number 3 in the team, a position given to the biggest, strongest, toughest boys. And so he lost a quarter of his weight and ended up a skinny skeleton, and yet his BMI on paper was not low enough for them to call it officially anorexia. It was always an anorexia type illness, or eating disorder type illness. And I believe that it needs to be recognised that anorexia for boys and men can actually kick in much higher BMI than it does with slim girls, for example. And this was the case with Ben. But hey, I'm rambling again. But I'll end on a positive note again, and that is the fact that Ben is now 29 years old, fully recovered, and well on his way to becoming a qualified psychologist, so he can use his experiences to help other people who are going through similar problems. I think that is so wonderful. And if anything good was to come out of the eating disorder, that is it. The fact that hopefully Ben will go on to help many, many people with their struggles. He starts a job in a couple of weeks' time working in mental health, and I really hope that he's going to be able to change lives, because I know he wants to. Well, Ben is actually this week at a mindfulness retreat for a week with other similar people, and he's coming back today, hopefully very chilled out and with a lot of new ideas and new thinking. And I can't wait to hear how it went. From what he said on his texts, it sounds like it's gone really, really well. And hopefully things like this are yet another thing that will add to the building blocks of this amazing young man who's become, who will help other people. And that is so amazing, and I am so very proud of him. Thank you for listening. You'll find a link below to my blog, and you'll also find a link to my website where you can download free PDFs of my blog, and also a link to Amazon where you can buy a copy of my book.